We're at the literal halfway point of the season, and you need to know who are the guys you can trust the rest of the way. Of course, we're going to land on that today in the SPAGS rankings, where I combine a bunch of data points together that are relevant to me. The EPA metric, expected points added, the volume metrics, the red zone work, all the things that are important for you to score points in fantasy football. We're going to talk about it here. And today, we're going to get a little bit different. We're actually going to start with the tight ends because I think it is important to talk about this one. Once again, the Taylor Swift image makes it. I know football fans love to hear about Taylor Swift. Learned that firsthand Sunday morning as a YouTube chat. Rebelled against me and my pal Josh Engelman on the Stochastic channel for talking Taylor. But frankly, Taylor matters. Taylor on the Eras tour right now. And frankly, the issue with Travis Kelce this past week, no Taylor. It doesn't matter that it was cold weather. It doesn't matter it was in Denver. It doesn't matter that Patrick Mahomes was sick. All that mattered was Taylor wasn't there, encouraging him to reach the heights that he deserves. But really stood out to me how much of a difference there is between Travis Kelce and everybody else in the position this week. Obviously, he's been this way for a few weeks now, but we've seen Andrews coming out a little bit more. Hockenson, we'll see what he does this week. Looks like it'll be Jaron Hall going for this week. In the future, though, should be Josh Dobbs, and that should help things level out for Hockenson. But because of what's going on right now with Andrews, Hockenson, these guys are fine. They are not gaining ground on Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce had a dog shit game versus Denver. He's still a guy you can trust. And what really stands out with a guy like Kelce, I would rank him ahead of a lot of players that actually matter in fantasy football across other positions using this metric. And the SPAGS score, for what it's worth, is really going to support running backs the most because they get so much volume. It's going to support wide receivers a lot because of how they create value with the EPA metrics, creating points above expectation every time. Kelce, though, ahead of guys like Travis Etienne, CeeDee Lamb, DeAndre Swift, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Raheem Mostert, Isaiah Pacheco, Derrick Henry, Jahmyr Gibbs, Nick Chubb, Devontae Adams. This is how good Kelce has been this year in terms of his usage, in terms of his ability to add value to what he's doing with every play. 0.4 EPA per target, 9.7 intended touches per game, 1.5 red zone targets per game, 1.5 deep targets per game. This is one of the most valuable roles in football. So I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know with Kelce, but I do think it's noteworthy here because sometimes people miss the tight ends versus wide receivers things, especially on DFS slates. You just got to treat Travis Kelce like you are treating any 8K wide receiver. You got to treat him like these guys because otherwise we're going to miss on opportunities for him where he can have really big games. And of course, best example is going to be a couple weeks ago where Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews make a winning Millie Maker winning lineup. I shouldn't have said winning twice there, but it's that impressive. And they played two tight ends, so you have to say winning twice. The point being that Kelce adds so much value that you should never sleep on him on a slate. Certainly, if Taylor Swift is in attendance, he could dock him a few points. But I really think with what Travis Kelce is doing, we have to start with tight ends here because he is really being a difference maker at the position. Even if for best ball and all of that, might be hard for him to dig out of just how many good wide receivers and even running backs, perhaps, there might have been around him. Other tight ends to hit on here. Mark Andrews, again, still a perfectly fine play, but it's such a chasm between him and Travis Kelce. Kelce, again, 9.7 intended touches per game. Mark Andrews, 6.4 intended touches per game. So that is a pretty big jump there between number one and number two. Andrews, though, very efficient overall. He's actually now more efficient per touch than Travis Kelce is, 0.48 EPA per target. You also are seeing 1.4 red zone targets per game, 0.3 deep targets for him for Mark Andrews. You're also getting one target inside the 10-yard line per game for Andrews. So that's something where I'm actually spreading out my red zone work where I'm still looking at the red zone targets, but now instead of looking inside the 5-yard line, I'm looking a little more at inside the 10-yard line because there's a little more back testing efficacy that you can find there correlating with potential to score touchdowns compared to inside the 5-yard line, which gives you a smaller number, but obviously a higher chance of scoring. So minor data point that I probably don't even need to talk about, but I will reference for your guys' sake if you are following closely here on the SPAGS rankings. Andrews, though, no issue with him. Obviously, Lamar getting better by week as well. That bodes well for Andrews. The Ravens looking better per week. And Gus Edwards, too, at a certain point, he's not going to have these outlier days. When he does not have those outlier days, you can see more tight end touchdowns. You can see more outlier days in terms of yardage gained for Mark Andrews. That's a lot of potential there for Andrews and a Baltimore offense that, as we've talked about, looked really bad to start the year, but that was a report that was going on since July. Week to week, they're getting better and better, showing more and more ceiling, more and more success with what they're doing. And Lamar looks better week to week. And that's just going to benefit Andrews, whether it's this week, whether it's next week. It doesn't matter. What it's really going to benefit him, though, I think, is week 17 against Miami. That is still a game where I think that Baltimore stack, the most valuable one to have out there. I forgot to give my usual shout out to the chat. I forgot to tweet this one out in advance because I was in such a rush here getting the data going, getting the graphics going, dealing with our cleaners coming in. So appreciate all you guys being here. But our guys, Spurious News, who is squirting today? I hope each and every one of you. That's all I ever ask. Just come to the channel and squirt away. Number 3, TJ Hawkinson. He's so much less efficient than Andrews and Kelsey. That's a big part of why he is at number 3. 0.18 EPA per target, but 8.5 targets per game, 1.1 red zone targets per game, 0.6 inside the 10-yard line per game. It's good usage for a guy like TJ Hawkinson, but as I mentioned earlier, having just 1 week of Jaron Hall throwing him the ball, I don't think it's going to be the most successful week. We'll see if maybe they change their mind and Dobbs can pick up enough of the offense in a handful of days to get out there. But what they said is that Hall is going to go. If that is the case, Hawkinson should be a safety blanket, but a lot less efficient safety blanket. And he's already not that efficient. So you would need him to get a lot more targets than he's already getting. And he's getting so many. Again, he's number 2 in targets besides Travis Kelsey at the tight end position. So Hawkinson, again, a fine play. You should feel good about him if you have him. But I would rather have Andrews. I'd rather have Kelsey. And I think I'd rather have a little more stability in the position, even though Dobbs, as we saw this past week, Dobbs can feed the hell out of a tight end, if nothing else. Like, he might not be able to feed Justin Jefferson efficiently, might not be able to get those deep balls to Jordan Addison going, even though the beloved Jameis Winston, I think, the rumored trade that was on Twitter before the Dobbs trade happened, boy, would that guy have gotten Jordan Addison some balls. They might have been 10 yards overthrown, might have been picked half the time, but Lord knows we would have seen at least a 70-yard bomb at some point. We are not going to see that with Joshua Dobbs. Sam Laporta in a number 4. He is, I think, to me, there's a lot of guys who could say steal of the draft with what Devon Achane did. Obviously, if he comes back and does that again, he's a steal of the draft kind of guy. Adam Thielen, a guy that I didn't take. I know a lot of people in the best ball community didn't take. He's also steal of the draft territory. But Sam Laporta is just giving you steady game after steady game after steady game at tight end, being efficient with his touches as well, 0.18 EPA per target. It's the same as Hawkinson, and this is a rookie coming into the league, granted in a better offense. That's going to help him out a little bit. But Laporta, 7.4 targets per game. That is huge for a rookie. Again, more than Mark Andrews. That'd be number 3 overall in terms of tight end volume. Actually, no, he'd be behind Evan Ingram, so my bad. But still, basically right there with him. So Laporta, to me, with where you got him, with the opportunity, with the fact that tight end is still a really gross position where it could move around with the guys having 1-2 touchdown day. For having Laporta be doing what he is doing, I really think this is a spot for Sam Laporta where even if he gives you 5-point games for a few weeks, you have the right pick. Like, you got the right guy. You got the best of the rookies. Kincaid's going to come on strong, it seems like, based on this move to more 11 personnel for him, just getting more snaps, being out there, and not being a kind of a gimmicky slot tight end guy. That's going to probably make him make a surge up this list. But I think it's hard for him to catch Laporta at this point with what he's been doing for the first 8 weeks of the season. And I think just the outlook moving forward, it's not going to get worse for him. Jameson Williams is going to steal a lot of targets, it looks like. Donovan Peoples-Jones is not going to be much more than a shittier version, a poor man's version of Jameson Williams, or what Jameson Williams was supposed to be. I just don't know how it gets worse for Laporta barring injury. So Laporta, to me, one of the strongest plays we will talk about today, just relative to where he was getting drafted. Let's see. The Spags, would you squirt over Taylor Swift? No, I would not squirt over Taylor Swift. I've heard far too much of her music in my life. But that said, if she could push me to greatness like she's pushed Travis Kelsey to greatness, I suppose I could. Suppose that would be a thing that would really speak to my mind. Jimmy G benched Aiden O'Connell starting the rest of the season. That is an interesting one. Obviously, the coaching shift, you'd expect there to be a change, but that is an interesting one to have announced right away. Feels like more of a tank job for the Raiders, which the trade deadline has passed, so we'll see Davante Adams. I am worried about Davante Adams that he might end up in kind of a DeAndre Hopkins last year situation where even if Adams gets back off the schneid, starts playing a little bit better with Aiden O'Connell, which we'll see. Aiden O'Connell can certainly be swayed to throw Davante Adams the ball more, but it's not going to be a lot more efficient. That pocket protection was so bad, which is why Jimmy G kept falling apart. So we'll see what happens with the Raiders moving forward, but they now can't do anything with the guys who would make sense to move. Josh Jacobs rumored to be traded to the Ravens. Ravens wouldn't give up a second rounder for him, which was what the Raiders wanted. So weird situation for the Raiders overall, but at least some hope there of those teams bouncing back. And again, the Colts Raiders week 17, still live for there to be a lot of points. It's just not going to be the guys that I wanted to see out there. Let's see. Next tight end coming up, George Kittle. George Kittle, technically the most efficient tight end in football. 0.52 EPA per target, 5.4 targets per game, though, is where things are a little bit rough. Also 0.9 red zone targets, only 0.1 inside the 10-yard line per game. It's not great usage for George Kittle. Where he might benefit is that the Niners are just floundering right now. And a large reason why I think they're floundering is that defense is not as good as it was last year. They made a few trades to try to shorten that up, to try to tighten that up a little bit more. But what I think we should see is this offense push a little bit more into action, pass a little bit more, drop back a little more, play with a little bit more efficacy, a little more efficiency, a little more speed. It would be great. All those things really for the Niners. But they've been a good team. We'll talk about the QB section. Like Brock Purdy, people on social media go, Brock Purdy, I told you he's not that guy. It's not his fucking fault. It's the overall construction of the team right now where they can't get away playing like they did last year, where that defense just took over games, limited everything. They're not doing that right now. So that's the main thing for me with what I'm seeing from the Niners. And I do think that they should be passing more. They should be more aggressive with this great offense. If they are, George Kittle's going to get there more. If they're not, George Kittle is going to keep doing what he's doing. We're one good week, one point week. That's kind of how it goes. LV messed up by not trading Jimmy G if they aren't going to bench him, or if they're going to bench him. Yeah. I guess, I mean, he didn't do much for his value this year, so I don't know what you're really getting for him, but it does feel like the Vikings, I guess, I don't know. Do you want to trot out Jimmy G out there and just do the same thing? I worry for him that he really was driven a lot of his success by Kyle Shanahan, and he looked good to start the year, which gave me some hope. But I do think for Jimmy G, I don't know that he's a better move than a Josh Dobbs. I don't know. I don't know that Jimmy G finds another home at this point besides as a pure backup. Evan Ingram comes in this week, and Evan Ingram, the good news for him, still not that efficient overall. 0.08 EPA per target, more of a pure volume guy at 7.6 opportunities per game for him. But he did get 2 red zone targets this past week, so he's now up to an average of 0.3 red zone targets a game, which actually does matter. He's still not gotten in the box yet for a touchdown. When he does get there, obviously it's going to help you out a little bit. Ingram, though, some signs of life there where if you see 7 straight weeks of no red zone usage, that gives me some cause for concern. And obviously ATN running hot has been a big part of that. But certainly for Ingram, just getting any red zone work is a positive sign for him, because he needs that to be able to take a leap upwards, because he's basically gotten as much as he can out of the targets he's been getting. And he's been getting a lot of targets to go around with that. Let's go. Darren Waller coming up next. 0.28 EPA per target for him. Are you breaking down the NBA slate? No, when would I ever? I've never done that, Mr. Shadow Dog. I appreciate you, but no, this is just football. Splash Play is an only football channel. I do NBA for other stuff. Maybe one day there'll be an NBA channel if I can find the time in my life, but no, no NBA here today. Darren Waller coming up next. And Waller, I don't know what goes this season for him. Obviously going to see Saquon, I think, be a relevant player this week. The injuries for Daniel Jones, not great. We'll see if it ends up being him or Tommy DeVito. Daniel Jones cleared for contact, but can re-injure himself pretty easily. So I don't know what you do if you're the Giants in a season that seems like they're playing for absolutely nothing. But Waller, another hamstring injury. How long he's going to be out, we'll find out as well. But a guy with a history of hamstring injuries, history of soft tissue injuries, over 30. He's been as good as he could be, I guess, in a terrible Giants offense. But this hamstring injury for him, it's not one where I want to victory lap it, because I certainly didn't draft Waller a ton this year. But I do think this is sort of the risk point of Waller when you did draft him. That is something that moving forward, where I really feel like for Waller, I don't know that he's going to have the upside this year, because by the time he's healthy and good to go and be full go is probably a time of year where the Giants are not playing for anything. So for Waller, I kind of expect him to drop off this chart. Though him being injured, I guess maybe he could stay pat with just the efficiency he's had so far this year. Spag, just wanted to say thank you for all your content. I appreciate that. Charles here, Go AZ Cards is what I always think of you in my head, but you are Charles, so I appreciate you being here. And of course, Splash Play, Monday to Friday, 11 a.m. We'll always keep doing the grind here every single day while the season goes on. And of course, when the season ends, we hop right into best ball season. That is the Splash Play world, fantasy football all year round. So I really do appreciate you guys being here for me, no matter what the video is. That does mean a lot to me. Cole Kmet, let's talk about him. He's actually been really good this year. I think in a really adverse condition. Obviously, Justin Fields had the few really good games, but Tyson Badgett had another ceiling game for Cole Kmet this past week. So for him, 0.31 EPA per target, 5.3 intended touches per game, 0.3 deep targets per game, 1 red zone target, 0.5 inside the 10-yard line per game. This is great usage for Cole Kmet. He's paying off that big contract they gave him that a lot of people didn't seemingly have a lot of faith in. So for Cole Kmet, I think he has quietly been a killer. I think he is a guy that I guess if he has a few more hot games, he could pass Ingram. He could pass Waller easily. I think if the volume isn't there for Kittle, he could pass him too. Cole Kmet is live to be a top 5 tight end on the year. And I think he really was like, there were times in drafts where if the Justin Fields drafter didn't take Cole Kmet in best ball, he would just go undrafted into the 170s, 180s. I didn't believe that was ever the right thing for him. And I think it's really showing here with the fact that he does have a tangible ceiling in shitty conditions. Like Tyson Badgett throwing to you is not where you want to be to have a really big tight end ceiling. But Cole Kmet keeps making it happen. So I think for him, really, he deserves his flowers a little more than he's been getting this year. Logan Thomas, another guy who should benefit. Curtis Samuel, very banged up. Probably benefits a guy like Jahan Dotson the most, as we saw this past week. Got some of those Curtis Samuel opportunities that have been really valuable for some reason to start the year. But Logan Thomas, another guy who can get some easy slot targets. He's been heavily involved. He's stayed healthy for the most part, playing 49 snaps per game, 5.7 targets per game, only 0.7 inside the red zone. But when he is getting targeted, he's getting targeted inside the 10-yard line. So that is good news for Logan Thomas, that he can probably convert those to a few more touchdowns. Logan Thomas has a ceiling. He's got something of a floor, at least relative to a shitty tight end position. So I think he makes sense as number 9, even though number 9 could move down 3 spots, could move up 2 spots. Like, it wouldn't be that shocking. It does feel, though, like, to me, a little bit of a tier break with Cole Kmet. I think it's Cole Kmet, and then it's Logan Thomas and everybody else. So I think Cole Kmet, to me, represents kind of the end of that tier. And obviously, we know the top 3 tier is Kelsey, Andrews, Hockenson. And I guess that middle tier, I feel like Laporta is kind of on a tier of his own, but I think those would be the tiers for me. Would be Laporta to Kmet, and then Kelsey to Hockenson, and then everybody else basically would be in that final tier. Ferguson coming in at number 10 here. Again, he's basically tied with Dallas Goedert, as it says on the screen. Ferguson, though, the red zone work has been great for him. Tony Pollard, we're going to talk about in a moment. His red zone work has been coming down in a big way. Jake Ferguson has stayed there. 1.7 red zone targets per game, 0.9 inside the 10-yard line per game. That's great usage for a guy who he himself is actually pretty efficient. 0.23 EPA per target, so he's much better than Dalton Schultz was last year. Not getting the same volume at just 4.7 targets per game, but he is still a lot more efficient with it. So in this Dallas offense that is really hard to get a read on, where it's clearly not as good as it was last year, but it is capable of providing ceiling games for guys like CeeDee Lamb and even guys like Ferguson, who got there recently as well. I think this is a spot for Ferguson where he is a player that if he's going to be low owned, if he's going to be cheap, I think those are the weeks you can try to target him for a spike week. If he's going to be a chalk play, maybe move somewhere else. But I think Ferguson, to me, was one of those players that's quietly doing his thing pretty well and staying ahead of guys like Goddard, who I really would have thought had a shot to break into the elite tight end tier. Ferguson is just a guy, but he is the best version of just a guy that you can find. Other guys, honorable mention guys, again, Dallas Goedert, Kyle Pitts, David Njoku, Dalton Schultz, and Dalton Kincaid. Kincaid would be the one out of that group that I think can really take a surge upwards. Obviously, the opportunity here with Dawson Knox on the sideline for at least another 3 weeks should be a good thing for him. But Kincaid looked great with the new role, looked great with the new opportunity, some design touches as well. Nice little shovel pass effort for him to get him into the end zone in that one too. Kincaid's a guy I expect to be able to surge upwards. And I think Kincaid could get into that tier with Laporta, Kmet, and all those guys. But he's got to obviously keep doing it for a few more weeks. Speaking of Buffalo here, sending love from the B-Low. Love this shit. Let's go Buffalo, the Buffalo War Pigs. Our guy Sammy, always appreciate him being here. And of course, Sammy, a brilliant man who is a part of the Squirt Squad officially because he hit that join button down below. $4.99 a month gets you all the VIP access you could imagine here. Custom emojis. You could ask me questions whenever you want, either whether it be on Twitter, deposit game in Discord. Happy to talk game theory with you. And of course, you get my special data sheet, which includes all this information on Saturdays, which will give you everything you need to know heading into the weekend. So check that out here. And of course, for free, you also will get this full SPAGS rankings in the pinned comment down below when this video ends. So I'll make sure to drop that the second that we get done here. All right, let's keep it going, guys. Let's talk about which position should I go to next? I feel like I always go to QB. So let's stick with that. Let's go back to QB here. Jalen Hurts, number 1 overall. And Jalen Hurts, as I've talked about in the past, I just don't think Jalen Hurts can lose this spot with the opportunities here. You can see on the screen, 14.6 rushes plus deep throws per game. That is something where that's what fantasy is to me. That's what I helped me get on Josh Allen before everybody else in the world was on Josh Allen. Played him in a game in his rookie season where nobody in the world wanted to play him, got laughed off the stochastic stream back then because people did not think Josh Allen could get there. You know what happened? He broke the slate versus the Patriots. That's what happens when guys throw the ball deep, when they run the ball at high volume. Jalen Hurts does that every game, and he's still looking a little bit better week to week, up to a 0.03 EPA per pass, 0.06 EPA per drop back. So he's getting into the positives, but he still has a little more that he can scrape in terms of ceiling there because he was better in both those metrics last year. Less efficient in everything he's doing does mean that if he just gets back to where he was previously, whether it be the health stuff, whether it be the new offensive coordinator, I don't know. But I think for Jalen Hurts, the main thing that stands out for me is that he is just going to get the ball downfield. He's got great targets, obviously, to accomplish that as well. But the rushing opportunity is so huge for him. The red zone rushing opportunity, we know the tush-push stuff, the brotherly shove. But 3.3 red zone rushes per game is top in the league at QB. And he's also 0.8 ahead of Lamar, who's the only guy getting a meaningful amount of red zone rushes besides Hurts. This is just a great role for Hurts. He's the one elite QB. I mean, Allen, if the offense keeps looking like it did last week, He can maybe pay off that price tag as well. Certainly can pay it off over the course of a regular season, maybe not week to week in the playoffs. But Hurts, I think, has that explosive ceiling, has obviously the ability to give you reasonable weeks every single week. That's the thing for Hurts that I think adds the most value here. So he's a player I wouldn't give up in any format, would not, don't know that he'll fully pay off his ADP. Obviously, if he wins Best Ball Mania or wins the DraftKings Millie, he will pay off that ADP. But still, just a guy that if you roll into the finals with him, you have as good of a shot as anybody to win it all. Especially going against Arizona, like that's going to be. They can put it down and put 50 points up in half, and Jalen Hurts can win everything. So he is the top QB, and I don't see that changing. Patrick Mahomes is a dud week, but still didn't move that much in the SPAGS rankings. 0.2 EPA per pass, 0.1 EPA per drop back. Under pressure, still pretty good. Negative 0.3 EPA per pressured play, though that did come down pretty bad this week with how he handled things at Denver. Mahomes was sick this week if you want to give him some cover, but I really thought he should have been able to put it down more against the Denver team that he's now struggled against twice this year. I don't know why. Denver is really a weak defense, but some teams clearly have some issues with them. Jordan Love, shout out to fucking Jordan Love. But besides that, Mahomes, I think, is just, going to be there every week. I just wish he ran a little bit more, 4.5 rushes per game. Obviously, he's never going to be Jalen Hurts, never going to be Lamar Jackson in that category. And that's going to keep him from being number one here. But besides that, the usage is good. If you press it downfield more, maybe he can move up the rankings and get a little bit closer to Jalen Hurts. But I don't think he can actually take over the number one spot. I need Fields to get back on the field ASAP. Yeah, Fields not being out there, and it is going to be Tyson Bagent again this week. I don't know what they're doing. Clearly, they made a trade to acquire a high-caliber defensive player in Montez Sweat. I believe that's who they got, right? But they got defensive players, whatever. They acquired somebody for a second-round pick. Another stupid second-round pick trade for the Bears for a guy they also have to pay a lot of money for. But still, with them, at least they are trying to win. So them trying to win means that Fields can get back out there. Why they're trying to win, I don't know, given that they could have 2 top 10 picks and have them be really high if they tank right now. Even if you want to keep Fields, like you want to have that optionality to make a trade and all that. But the Bears, just a team that I don't think they really know what they're doing, if I'm being honest. So we'll see. But Fields should be back out there, you would think. Lamar comes in at number 3, and Lamar I have to give credit for. He has made gigantic strides over the last, I would say, 3 weeks, especially probably closer to last month. He's now at 0.3 EPA per pass, 0.14 EPA per drop back. Under pressure, still struggling a little bit with a negative 0.45 EPA and a 20% sack rate when he's getting pressured. So if you get home on him, it's going to be a bad spot, but still handling a little better than he did earlier in the year. 3.3 deep throws per game has not converted that to a touchdown or an interception. So his deep throws was kind of nothing. Obviously, that's an area that he can gain some opportunity as well. But for right now, he's not doing a lot with it. But the 9.3 rushes per game for a 0.3 EPA per rush, that's tremendous usage. 2.5 red zone rushes per game for Lamar as well. You just can't find that much opportunity for many guys at QB. So Lamar, a great play. Obviously, Josh Allen could theoretically catch him. Allen, though, still not running as much this year, as we'll talk about in a moment. I guess we can talk about it now. Josh Allen's running 4.5 times per game. So if Allen is going to keep running half the amount of times per game that Lamar runs, he has to be so efficient with those runs to just make up for that opportunity. And I don't think that'll be the case. He has been more efficient than Lamar, a 0.5 EPA per rush compared to that 0.3 we talked about for Lamar. But it's just the difference there with just the volume. You want to have the volume. Lamar, we know, could break 50-yard rushes. So can Josh Allen. But having half the opportunities to break that 50-yard rush, that's a pretty big difference between Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. So I would favor Lamar right now, even though Allen, we know the ceiling is obviously there in a big way too. Josh Allen, besides that, he's looking good. 0.17 EPA per pass, 0.09 EPA per dropback. The best under pressure of all the QBs we've talked about so far, minus 0.17 EPA per dropback under pressure. And obviously pressured plays, you expect to be closer to negatives because of the fact that it is a situation under duress. So guys just being able to stay roughly under negative 0.3 EPA per pressured play is a pretty okay mark to have. So Josh Allen doing everything he can. Obviously, this offense, I think, that's the biggest read that I would have is this offense looked like a different offense. Gabe Davis got used entirely differently in that last game. A lot of short targets, a lot of wide open spaces for him. That bodes well for Allen getting some easy completions. Also makes for an easy stack partner that isn't Stephon Diggs. If Davis is not going to be the pure 30 points or 0 points kind of guy he's been in the past. So for Josh Allen, I think there are very good signs. That said, I do think he's, wouldn't say a distant number 4, but you could see the difference between these guys where it's like Hurts in the SPAGS score 66.4, Mahomes 61.7, Lamar 61.3. And then it is a pretty big drop to Josh Allen. Like I think that accurately reflects how these guys are playing. Unless Josh Allen starts to run a little bit more, throw it deep a little bit more, then he can make strides. But he's got to keep doing that for a period of time to really move up and get to that number 3 spot. Tua comes in, but right behind these guys. And Tua, one thing I did change this week to my rushing metrics was just to focus in on just the QB. I took out basically QB kneel downs, and I think one other QB run that was not, I didn't take out sneaks, but I did something with Tua here where he's now not looking quite as negative when he's running the ball. Still only running 2.6 times per game, but is at a 0.35 EPA rush with the change I made and how I was filtering. So that's really what's driving him up a little bit more here. And I think more accurately reflecting what the pool looks like. Obviously, Tua, the main thing for him, he's in a Miami offense where Tyreek might go for over 2,000 yards this year. So for Tua, that's going to be the biggest thing driving his value. I wish he were throwing it deep with more efficiency and just more volume. 3.6 deep throws per game. Obviously, throws to 20-plus air yards is what I'm talking about here. If he had 5, like, I think he'd be crushing. If he had 7, I think he would be the best QB on this list, just because of the fact that those deep throws go a lot farther in Miami than they do anywhere else. But that said, Tua, 0.3 EPA per pass, 0.1 EPA per drop back, negative 0.16 EPA per pressured plays, which would put him slightly better than Josh Allen. He's doing everything he can in a really well-structured offense. That's the biggest value for Tua. Hard to imagine him having the 40 fantasy point ceiling just because of the lack of rushing upside. But again, he can maybe punch one into the end zone at some point. It's not how they're designing things, but still, like it's not a part of his game, so I don't expect that. But that if he did have that, like he would be an easy number 1. Because he doesn't have that, he's going to probably be stuck around number 5 overall. Geno Smith taking a big surge upward here. He's incredibly efficient per pass. Actually, one of the most efficient guys per pass that we're going to talk about today. 0.34 EPA per pass now, 0.1 EPA per drop back, a negative 0.24 EPA when getting pressured, but he is getting a 6% touchdown rate up when he is getting pressured. 3.4 deep throws per game. He's not throwing it deep as much as he did last year. That is, I think, one of the flaws. The lack of involvement for DK Metcalf downfield has been a pain point for me as somebody that thought that Metcalf can make strides. And Metcalf has been a lot better this year, a lot more efficient, but he's just not getting the volume and also not getting the red zone opportunity he's gotten in the past. So that kind of hurts the Metcalf-Geno stacks. But that said, Geno's doing his part, not running as much either. 2.9 red zone rushes overall, per game, 0.7 inside the red zone. So adding not much red zone value to you as a rusher. No touchdowns on the year either in the run game. So that's Geno for you, where his biggest value comes is if you have a Lockett, if you have a Metcalf, if you have a JSN, those guys with Geno look great. Geno as a passer is doing his job. He's doing a great thing. He hasn't regressed in the ways that I thought he could with how he was kind of forcing the ball into some tight windows that felt hard to duplicate last year. He's doing it again. So Geno, full credit to him, has really rebounded. Has been one of the guys too that started the year kind of slow, getting better week to week. And we'll see how it affects things too with a guy like Charbonnet in the mix more. Charbonnet, a better pass catcher than Kenneth Walker, I think could open things up for Geno a little bit more, at least in a way where he can get some easy targets and maybe some easy red zone touchdowns as well. Justin Herbert coming up next. Herbert getting less efficient by the week. Keenan Allen also looking less good by the week. It's something with these guys where I just think this Chargers offense is not quite clicking on all cylinders. Granted, they didn't really have to this past week with what Tyson Bagent put on the field against them. But that said, Herbert 0.11 EPA per drop back, or 0.1 EPA per pass, 0.03 EPA per drop back, negative 0.45 EPA under pressure. So he's actually the worst under pressure of all the guys we've talked about so far besides Lamar. Only a 4% touchdown rate under pressure as well. He is running and throwing the ball deep at a pretty good rate, 4.6 deep throws per game, 4.1 rushes per game. So that is going to be a thing that adds value to him in these SPAGS score metrics. But overall, Herbert, to me, I think could be better, could also be worse as well. It just feels like this offense has gotten a little bit less sticky, a little bit less efficient. Eckler's involvement's been lower. Mike Williams being out, obviously not helping. Quentin Johnson getting in the mix, looking a little bit frisky against Chicago. Maybe that's something where there'll be more opportunity for Herbert moving forward. If you can keep getting a guy like Quentin Johnson the ball, because he's just going to add value with missed tackles and all of that. And I think for Herbert, what you're seeing with him right now is just he's playing pretty well, but this offense is not quite as good as we thought it would be. And that's sort of the main issue for him, is that if it gets pressed into action more, if they can really be kind of that full apex of what a Kellen Moore offense could be, then Herbert's going to look better. For right now, though, he's kind of slowly moving down the rankings here, and I think it's honestly pretty well deserved. Brock Purdy comes in next, and Brock Purdy still great. And I think, again, this frustrates me when I hear people on social media talk about like, oh, Brock Purdy's one killing the team. He's got a 0.4 EPA per pass, 0.12 EPA per drop back. He is doing everything he can to keep this team afloat. The issue is that he's still only dropping back 31 times per game. It's not a lot of opportunity for a guy like Purdy to really have the upside he needs to have. So for Brock Purdy, I think the biggest issue for him is just the way that the Niners are calling these games. They can't rely on this defense like they did last year, and they have to sort of make peace peace with that. And yet every week they keep not making peace with that and keep playing the same kind of conservative ball, willing to kind of chip away with Christian McCaffrey, willing to chip away with really just Christian McCaffrey. Even Ayuk wasn't getting that involved. So if they press the ball downfield more, which they should, that'll benefit Purdy quite a bit because he's only currently getting 2.4 deep throws per game, only getting 3.3 rushes per game, that it has come up a little bit. Purdy can run more. Purdy can throw it deep more. They need to use him like that. And I think that's the biggest thing I would say for what I would hope for the Niners with what they've run into with some of the issues that they've had so far, losing so many games in a row, but for a Niners team that should be a Super Bowl contender. So for them, if they do really adapt this offense and realize like, hey, we have to play with the pace of a team that's not good. Okay, we have to play with the pace of the Colts. We have to play with the pace of these teams that are actually out there and having success just because they're giving their offense a lot of opportunities. Their offense is so fucking good, but there's not giving them a chance to really be good. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that I've seen coaching wise this year, which, I'm me. Like I don't want to critique Kyle Shanahan, but he's just not doing enough, I think, to really use this team's strengths. And right now this team's strength is Brock Purdy. Any love for Carr? Seems like a great floor, but low ceiling. Let's see. Carr is a little bit outside here of the honorable mention category, but he's the middle of the pack QB. I don't know. Like if his stack gets there, he gets there. But the issue is that we're not seeing outlier days from Chris Olave. We're not seeing outlier days from Michael Thomas. We're seeing outlier days for Taysom Hill and Alvin Kamara. That's not going to lead to a ceiling day for Derek Carr. But if you see Kamara have a bad game, if you see Taysom Hill be less involved or also have a bad game, that's where Carr can really have an opportunity to get the ball to those guys and create a ceiling for himself. But the lack of rushing upside, like he needs other players to fail for him to kind of have the ceiling he needs to get to be useful for you. Matthew Stafford coming up next. Stafford's been a guy who's been performing really well in the year, but the lack of rushing upside kind of holds him back. 0.27 EPA per pass, 0.06 EPA per dropback. Under pressure, a negative 0.37 EPA, which is not great. Only a 3% touchdown rate there, taking sacks at an 18% clip when pressure comes through. But he's the best deep ball thrower out of all the QBs in the league. 0.96 EPA per deep throw is a really strong mark for him. 7%, or actually an 8% touchdown rate on deep throws as well is pretty good too. But again, 1.6 rushes per game. It's Matthew Stafford. He's also banged up, so that's not going to change. Stafford's ceiling is probably about where he's ranked right now. There's certainly days where you can have an outlier, but you need Kupp and Puka to hit. And then for DFS, how do you play guys like Kupp and Puka together? They're so expensive. I don't know how you can. So that's sort of where Stafford runs into an issue for me. Obviously, a terrible game this past week for him. I think it could get better, but he's going to be one of those guys that probably gets more hurt as the season goes on. If he gets more hurt, the efficiency is going to drop. So he really needs guys like Kupp and Puka to have outlier days for him to kind of get to where he needs to go. He's not going to be able to do it himself. Jared Goff leads off a pretty tight group here at number 10. Goff playing better week to week as well. 0.2 EPA per pass, 0.05 EPA per dropback. Still really struggles under pressure with a negative 0.55 EPA on those plays. So he'd be the worst amongst the top 10 by a pretty wide margin with that metric. Only a 2% touchdown rate when getting pressured. Also only 2.3 deep shots per game. This is where I kind of thought at a certain point, Jameson Williams could get out there and can be a guy that stretches the field a little bit more to open things underneath for guys like Amon-Ra, Gibbs, Sam Laporta. But we're not seeing that as kind of a deliberate intent by Detroit. So that's really limiting Jared Goff's upside. Like if he's giving you, the 50-yard bomb to Sam Laporta a couple of weeks ago, like those are going to be big plays that he can actually hit and add value to. There's really not giving him a shot because they kind of don't need to with how good this defense is and how much they can control the clock with the run game. That's sort of limiting what Jared Goff can do. So I really don't think it's on him. I think he's still got the same flaws he's always had, but for him, he's playing really well, playing well within the flow of this offense. I just wish it were more like a Miami offense and more like Miami when they're like really trying to dick stomp a team. I think Jared Goff would actually be really good in that spot with how how the Lions protect him, how he does have weapons that can get downfield. That's just not the way he's being used. Guys behind Goff: Levis, Baker Mayfield, Jordan Love, Josh Dobbs, Kirk Cousins, rest in peace. And then let's see. Dropping Howell to fill out depth. Okay. Where does Howell fall for me, actually? I'm curious about that because I really would have thought Howell would rank a little better. Man, Howell's a low tier for me. I guess it makes sense. He's a negative 0.23 EPA per pass guy. Throwing it deep a little bit more, up to 3.8 deep shots per game and 3 rushes per game. Yeah, Howell does not grade out for me at all. Howell actually I would have as one of the worst QBs in the league, which I don't know that I agree with in terms of fantasy, but that's what the SPAGS score is giving me, a lack of efficiency for Howell. So I guess I could see doing that, but Howell had a great game this past week. So I don't know. I think Howell still got upside. I think concentrating the targets for DFS will be a good thing, but Howell might just get there more on the volume of dropbacks than he will his own efficiency, which is going to be a bad thing for how I look at stuff. Obviously, I prefer the EPA metrics really push me towards efficiency stuff, and I want efficient players. Like, you want guys that give you above average results every time they're dropping back. Howell's going to be a roller coaster where if he keeps playing like that, it's just not good. We should talk about Levis briefly, just because I think it is an important player to talk about this week. Levis, to me, I think got really lucky in that game. I know that's not going to be like a controversial take or anything, though. I did see some people victory lapping or going like, fucking social media didn't know anything about Will Levis. He's so great. Look at him. Like, you could not have had cleaner pockets on those throws that he completed. Obviously, the one to Nick Westbrook-Akine in particular was like a really nice touch throw off the back foot and all of that. But that said, like, Will Levis, I think the way that he played offers a lot of fragility here where, yes, if they keep him clean and give him guys running open in open space like that, he might be able to hit those throws. But 0.09 EPA per pass with how he did is not that great. 0.06 EPA per dropback with how he did is not that great. Under pressure, he had a negative 0.9 EPA, so that is where things can really get a little bit squirrely for him. Did throw a touchdown, or might have thrown a couple touchdowns. I think at least one, though. He had an 8% touchdown rate on pressure plays, so he handled it well. But that is something I would look for as a weak spot. The one thing that Levis did well, though, which I have to give this Tennessee offense kudos for, because this is not a Tennessee thing. Levis threw the ball deep 7 times in that game, and he also ran 7 times. So that is Jalen Hurts level usage. I don't think that'll hold with that many deep throws. I think they'll kind of coach that out of him a little bit, especially when it starts to run bad. He had a 43% touchdown rate in his deep throws. Like, he basically threw a touchdown then on almost half of the deep throws he took. That's not going to happen every week. And when that doesn't happen, when it goes the bad way, they go like, all right, Levis, like, fucking chill out. If he keeps running like God, if he keeps Sun running like this, then maybe they'll keep letting him do it. But good signs in the usage, but like, it feels really fragile to me. And frankly, this again hurts even more. This is how I would have liked to see an AR get used, where he's combining for a lot of deep throws, running as well. He got the running, obviously, but Levis getting used the way you want a QB to get used. But I think it's going to come with a little fluidity moving forward. Like, if he's going to be chalky on Thursday against the Steelers, I wouldn't play him as much as the field. If he's going to be low owned, I would take the shot that he can do it again, because like 14 combined rushes and deep throws is nothing to fucking, that's that's not a joke. That's a crazy amount of opportunity for you as a fantasy player. So, but he's just not gonna be as good at it. That's like the main thing moving forward. All right, let's talk about the other positions. Let's get to running backs here. I'll pull them up on the screen. But guys, while we do this, or while we move over to this, please do subscribe down below. Please hit the like button. Please leave a comment. Should I just switch between these to give you guys epilepsy? Let's do that. But please, Splash Play perpetually on the march of 3K subs. And nobody, maybe somebody else does, but day to day, I don't think anybody else puts in the work that I do here, showing up Monday to Friday, every day at 11 a.m., doing the best I can to give you guys the data that I use, stuff that I look at, and try to put together a real process for us all to work through. So please do that. And of course, come back tomorrow, the showdown video for Thursday Night Football. I've been crushing showdowns in terms of my content this year. That's one where I feel really confident about, where I think I put out better showdown content than anybody in the biz. I'll put my dick on the line for that one. I'll come back tomorrow here. And of course, Splash Play, always want you here. Join the community here. And of course, don't be afraid to hit that join button down below for $4.99 a month and get more and more shit. The more that I do, the more that I'll build more things out to try to make this valuable for you guys. All right, running backs. Let me pull them up here. Alvin Kamara, of course, atop the charts once again. And last week, I think I was the only guy to put Alvin Kamara in a thumbnail and go, hey, this is the guy whose workload you don't want to avoid. He's currently the #1 running back in football in terms of how he's being used. That's the case again here. Now, that said, he paid off last week, had some good runs. I still see some concerning things for Kamara, where he came down 1 intended touch per game, down to 26 per game, so he's not a 27 anymore. But he's also just not avoiding tackles, 3.5% avoided tackle rate. Yards after contact, 2 yards after contact is not that great. He's getting 8.8 targets per game, so that's unbelievably great. That is like a gift from God if you have Kamara. He's getting that much opportunity overall, and they're all behind the line of scrimmage too, so it's like, even if he gives you nothing, he's going to give you those, 7 catches there. He's going to give you 7 points, and he could literally fall down, and he'll still give you 7 points. So that is a positive thing to look at for Kamara. Red zone work, also great. 3.6 red zone rushes per game, 1.2 red zone targets per game, 2.4 rushes inside the 10-yard line per game, which is one of the higher marks in the league, actually getting more rushes inside the 10-yard line than Christian McCaffrey does. I don't know how you argue Alvin Kamara. I don't think he's good. I think if you gave Kendre Miller this workload, I know you wouldn't trust him, same in pass protection, so it couldn't be like a 1-to-1 thing. I think Kendre Miller would be the best back in football too. Like, that's how I feel about Alvin Kamara. But that said, opportunity is opportunity. There's so much opportunity going Kamara's way. It's not shifting around too much. You're seeing maybe one touch get shed to guys like Jamal Williams, guys like Kendre Miller. If Kamara goes down, this is the most valuable role in football for someone to be picking up. If Kamara keeps playing, it's the most valuable role in football for him to keep playing with. And that's ultimately what it is right now. Even though the Saints aren't a good team, they run everything through him or Taysom Hill. And some game to game that'll change. But over the course of a season, in terms of the macro, I don't see how this changes. Kamara's a world beater with where he got drafted. Christian McCaffrey still playing pretty well. Negative 0.03 EPA per rush, which is actually the same as Alvin Kamara. But Kamara, negative 0.02 EPA per pass. Christian McCaffrey, 0.46 EPA per pass, which is actually borderline insane for a running back to be having that high of an EPA per pass because he's getting targeted, for the most part, closer to the line of scrimmage. He's getting targeted 0.7 air yards per target. So obviously McCaffrey does see a little more deep targets, but he's still basically getting targeted right at the line of scrimmage. He's still making this happen. So you have to give McCaffrey his flowers for that. Like, he is an unbelievable guy in the pass game. 4.5 red zone rushes per game, 2.1 inside the 10-yard line, 0.9 red zone targets per game, 0.4 inside the 10-yard line. McCaffrey's role is elite. The touchdown record, as we talked about in the best ball video yesterday, that's also forcing him to keep him out there and also making sure that they give him that chance to get a touchdown going. I believe he's got to hit 2 more games before he sets that record. It might be 1, so don't misquote me on that one. But I think for McCaffrey, it's just that, I worry about the usage and his health with that and just how that's going to go. I worry about the Niners getting more of a desire to push the ball downfield because this defense isn't doing enough. Obviously, if your defense is crushing, just give the ball to the running back 25 times a game and just let it go from there. If the defense is not crushing, you should play a little more aggressive offensively. You should get the ball downfield to guys like Ayuk. When Debo's back in, Kittle. They have a lot of weapons they can get the ball to kind of be more aggressive and play more aggressively to actually put some distance between them and other teams if the defense isn't going to do it. But I think with the moves they made, I think they still trust the defense and think it's going to get better. We'll see. But if that's the case, like, defense being good for McCaffrey. Usage being what it is, I think not good for McCaffrey. Like, I'd rather have him, if I were a McCaffrey owner, I'd rather have him have 2 less touches a game, 3 less touches a game. He's at 21.8 per game right now. I'd rather have him have a few less touches and just be healthy for the rest of the go. But if he's going to keep getting pushed into action as he has been, we'll see how it goes. But right now he's beating the odds. He's doing everything he can. So McCaffrey owner is very happy, and shout out to Big Lenny, of course. Here you go. Here's him dropping a load on my face with him paying off his ADP basically. David Montgomery, 0.02 EPA per rush, 0.07 EPA per pass. He's back in the list because he should be making a return at some point. Montgomery's had one of the best roles in football, in large part because of the 5.4 red zone rushes per game he's getting, 3.2 inside the 10-yard line per game that he's getting. That said, with how Gibbs played this past week, and I mentioned again, another thing we talked about in the Showdown video, best spot that Jahmyr Gibbs would ever have in his life is just no David Montgomery breathing down his neck. Craig Reynolds took some off the table. Gibbs still went absolutely apeshit in that game. That's something where you can't give Montgomery the 20.8 touches per game that he was getting before this. I guess that's a little bit low because of the injury, so you could probably give him 20 touches a game. Montgomery doesn't get you to 25, though, I think, moving forward. So that's what we expected. Talked about earlier on. Montgomery goes up, Gibbs comes up, or Montgomery goes up, Gibbs goes down. Montgomery goes down, Gibbs goes up. That's kind of how that goes. In this spot, I think Montgomery is still going to be the red zone back. Like, he's a much better red zone touchdown guy than Gibbs is going to be, and obviously Craig Reynolds as well. But he's going to have less pass game work because Gibbs is electric in short passes, even though Montgomery's been good with that. So I think Montgomery's role right now, it makes sense to me why he's number 3, but I do think for him, it's going to be hard for him to hold on to that spot when he gets back in because Gibbs has changed the equation for him in a way where it was not when he was still healthy. Excuse me. Kyron Williams still on the list here, obviously on IR. We're heading into, I believe, his 3rd week of being on IR, so hopefully he can make a return shortly after that. Great in the run plays, 0.1 EPA per rush. Less good in the pass game, negative 0.3 EPA per pass. And again, to speak to what McCaffrey's doing, we are talking about a difference of 0.7 points, points added for every time these guys touch the ball. So Kyron Williams has one of the best roles in football, a McCaffrey-esque role, and he's so much less efficient with it, which I think you have to kind of give the kudos to Christian McCaffrey for, given that Kyron's younger, obviously, not as talented, but still, just being younger, you would think it'd be closer, but it's not. Kyron Williams, though, 20.2 touches per game, 4 red zone rushes, 2 inside the 10-yard line per game, 1.2 red zone targets, 0.2 which are inside the 10-yard line per game. Just great usage for Kyron Williams. The Rams offense, I kind of think going the wrong direction, but we'll see because you do have guys like Puka and Cooper Kupp who are great and you can have better games, but Stafford being banged up, Kupp being less effective, Puka, I think, being relied on a little bit too much just because, like, you want, I think, that's to be pretty close to even for Kupp and Puka's target distribution. I think those are not great signs for Kyron Williams coming back in, but maybe they're not good right now because Kyron Williams isn't out there. Like, Darrell Henderson's done okay. Royce Freeman got in the box. Like, that's all great. But Kyron is clearly a more diverse weapon for those guys. So I think that's something that could be hurting the overall team. And if that's the case, Kyron should come back in and get a pretty big workload right away, assuming that he's full health, because of the fact that he's clearly proven to be a key linchpin to this offense being credible moving forward. Saquon Barkley makes the list, and I had to highlight it here. Negative 0.21 EPA per rush, negative 0.39 EPA per target. He's awful. Like, he's absolutely awful. The Giants are awful too, so give him some cover. But he's even worse than he was last year. So the issue is that he's getting 27 intended touches per game. It's so much work. It's now the most work in the league. He's pulled ahead of Alvin Kamara. And again, I've talked about Alvin Kamara. Like, Alvin Kamara is, basically right around average with his touches. Saquon is actively taking value away with his touches, but he keeps getting them. He's at 4.6 red zone rushes per game, 1.2 inside the 10-yard line, 0.6 red zone targets per game, 0.4 inside the 10-yard line for him. It's great usage. Like, again, just not great. He does avoid tackles at a better clip than some of these other guys. A 13% avoided tackle rate, 26% avoided tackle rate when he's catching a pass. So he is doing something, but he's just not, like, keeping things ahead of schedule. He's keeping things behind schedule. And that's why the Giants are a bad team. Like, you give a guy that many touches, if your defense isn't good, you're just basically running out the clock on the year. And I hate Saquon as a player since he destroyed USC at Penn State. But honestly, like, at least then he looked great and had a lot of juice. The guy's got no fucking juice. Like, he's just a volume back, and the volume backs can get there. That's why he's top 5. And that's why the rankings are a check for me as well, where volume is king. Always volume is king. But efficiency with volume, that is where guys become Devon Achane, and guys who don't have efficiency, they become Saquon Barkley. Kenneth Walker, some concern for him. Zach Charbonnet really outtouched him in the second half of that game. Charbonnet also played pretty well in the pass game. Could have earned himself more of a role moving forward. After the game, Pete Carroll did say it was not a health issue for Walker. He was banged up coming into that one. Ended up not on the injured list or not on the report for the final injury report that came out. So we'll see moving forward. But this is kind of the concern for Walker for me. And I'm surprised because, as I've talked about, I think Walker's played about as well as he can. 34% avoided. Actually, no, he's down. 24% avoided tackle rate. Just down a little bit there. He's getting the red zone work, or was getting the red zone work. 4.3 red zone rushes per game. 2.6 inside the 10-yard line per game. That's great usage for him. But if Charbonnet comes in, if Charbonnet chips away any of that, Walker's ceiling is kind of gone. So Walker, to me, I don't know. If you're in a league that you could trade him for what he's been worth for the first half of the season, I'd probably do that just because I think Charbonnet is coming, and I really think Charbonnet is a very talented back. He was one of my favorite backs, one of my highest exposed backs in best ball. That said, like, Walker's been good enough that he shouldn't lose the role, but it kind of feels like he's losing the role anyway, which I don't know makes the most sense in terms of how this is going, but like, Walker and Charbonnet have utility, being 50-50 backfield. So I think those guys can still have upside, but if Walker's a 50-50 back, he's just not the same player. Like, it's not the same opportunity. And frankly, like, as much as I hate Saquon, I'd probably rather have a Saquon than a Walker being in a 50-50 backfield. It's just not going to give him the ceiling that he's had. And the reason he's had the ceiling is because they gave him so much work. Tony Pollard comes in right behind him. Pollard's role is getting worse by the week, where he stood out so much. He's still looking good, like 4.4 red zone rushes per game, 2.4 inside the 10-yard line per game. It's hard, 10-yard line per game. Excuse me, boy. Hard to talk so fast about so many guys. I apologize for the mumbly mouth shit that I subject you guys to. But Tony Pollard, I think the main thing for him is he's just not efficient. Negative 0.1 EPA per rush, avoiding tackles at a 5.6% clip. In the run game or the pass game, it's a little bit better, 0.07 EPA per pass. Needs to get more downfield targets. That'd be great for a guy like Tony Pollard, but they're using him how they're using him. So I would be more concerned with Pollard of the overarching usage, where it's just like less every week. Like, it's less good, a less opportunity every week. He busted his chalk this week, so that is going to be something in DFS where you can go back to him. And if you capture the upswing game, you're probably going to be a little more alone with it than you would have been otherwise. But for Tony Pollard, man, like, I think this opportunity for him, if he can't get there in a game where, like, they're obliterating the Rams, they could not have been more in the lead in that game. Could I be any more in the league, to quote our dearly departed friend, Chandler / Matthew Perry. They were so in the lead and they still didn't go to Pollard. That's a really bad sign for Pollard moving forward. But that said, like, the opportunity is there. It's not as good of an opportunity as it looked like it was going to be in the first 3-4 weeks of the season. Zach Moss hanging on here. The role keeps getting a little bit worse by week, but he's still being good with what he gets. 20.7 touches per game, 16.8% avoided tackle rate, 3.3 red zone rushes per game, 1.7 of which are inside the 10-yard line, 0.6 red zone targets per game. You expect this all to go to Jonathan Taylor. The usage patterns also weird for the Colts, where Taylor had such a hot first half and then barely got the ball in the second half. I don't know what to make of that. Maybe an injury thing, though they did say it was not an injury thing. For Zach Moss, it feels like this role is going to evaporate at some point, but for right now, he's hanging in doing his thing. So he's on the list, but barely on the list is how I'd look at that. Checking the chat. Charbonnet is who I picked up and I dropped Hal. There we go. Thank you, D. Owens. Appreciate the updates on your season-long team, but Charbonnet is a good pickup. I still wouldn't have dropped Howell, but I get trying to get the opportunity in Charbonnet. Josh Jacobs, I don't know. I don't know what to make of this. New coach coming in could sometimes mean a positive thing for the running back. We could see just really focusing on the run and just giving him a ton of volume. He's already getting pretty good volume, 22 intended touches per game, 3.5 red zone rushes per game, 2.1 inside the 10-yard line rushes per game, 0.8 red zone targets per game. Like, Jacobs is getting the work. He's just sucky with it. So what do you make of that with a new coach? I don't know. For Josh Jacobs, though, we will see. I think his role is pretty fluid. Them not trading him, I think is something that could go either way as well. The tanking stuff could go either way for Josh Jacobs. I think a very fluid position right now for Josh Jacobs, and one where he could be great. It could be a world beater in the second half, and it wouldn't shock me just because they could really, like, bad running backs or running backs on a bad team can get there pretty easily, whereas like receivers on a bad team have a harder time getting there. The Raiders could be a tanking team and just give the ball to Jacobs a lot, where we saw some usable games from James Conner last year in a similar situation. That could be the case for Jacobs, but I wouldn't plant a flag either way for a guy like Josh Jacobs. You're all good, D. Owens. I just have to bust your balls. It is always what we do here. Austin Eckler, negative 0.16 EPA per rush, negative 0.08 EPA per pass. He's also down to 20 touches flat per game. This is not the workload that was promised from the week one when he got hurt. I think we are now seeing the after effects of him not having that long-term contract, and also just being hurt. Like, he doesn't want to get this workload because he has to protect himself heading into another contract year next year. So for Austin Eckler, I get why it's going this way. It sucks. I think this Chargers offense, to me, a little bit less fun than it seemed like it was going to be. That's where I am with Austin Eckler. Still think he's a guy that's alive to move upwards. Like, I think he should move up ahead of a guy like Saquon Barkley, if not ahead of a Kyron Williams and David Montgomery. That said, he's got to get the work and he's got to get in the box, and he's not doing either of those things too well, even though we saw a little more upside. Eckler breaking the big pass for a touchdown against the Bears. Like, that was a good sign of life there. But it's just like he kind of needs to get both, where he needs to get those deep opportunities to get the ball into space and make something happen. And he also needs to get a ton of volume and good red zone work. And the red zone work and the volume are coming down just enough where he's probably not the same player you thought he would be. On the outside, looking into the top 10, Devon Achane, Joe Mixon, Travis Etienne, who still feels very live for regression just because the red zone usage is not as great as some of these guys. 3.3 red zone rushes per game. He's just punching everything in. He has 100% of the touchdowns, of the rushing touchdowns on the year for the Jags. So if you saw, Bigsby fumbled again, so I don't know how he ever gets back in and actually take a role. If you saw Bigsby steal a touchdown, if you saw Lawrence steal a touchdown, if you saw Evan Ingram finally get a red zone touchdown, those are all things that are going to hurt Etienne. I think he is running really hot. I wouldn't say trade him, but I think that you have seen the best of him from the past month. And I think it's possible you start to see like what the mid looks like for Travis Etienne moving forward. And, it could be okay still, but I just don't think he's like as much of a smash player as he's looked like recently. Jacobs feels like a symptom of a putrid offense who can't get to the red zone. That is true. I could tell you as somebody that really needed Daniel Carlson to pass both the Raiders D and the Lions D on Monday Night Football. They weren't even crossing the 50-yard line. So we'll see if Aiden O'Connell can be a little bit better. If nothing else, Aiden O'Connell will be a little bit less gun shy when pressure comes into the pocket. But that said, the Raiders not good, and everything, entire teams flow based on how the offense is flowing, obviously. So Jacobs not getting there, I think, as much on him as it is on the team, but the team's thinking is not going to help him out and do him any favors. All right, wide receivers. Let's get to them next. Where are they at? Tyreek. Love when these guys stay at number one, so I don't have to change the graphic. Tyreek, once again, creating some distance at number one. The way that he's doing it, he's got some of the highest volume in the league, 11.1 opportunities per game, which includes 0.1 rushes per game. He's actually been fantastic getting a rush with 14 yards per rush. He's also getting 2.3 deep targets per game, 1.6 red zone targets per game, 1.1 targets inside the 10-yard line per game. He's great, and he's also what he's doing with his deep balls, 2.3 deep balls per game, 1.6 of which are catchable balls. He's catching 1.5 of them. So if it's catchable, he's pulling it down. When he catches the ball, he's also got a 1.6 EPA per target. So he is damaging teams violently when he gets the ball downfield, which is why I want Miami just to keep throwing it downfield. I don't care what the situation is, just get it downfield, and Tyreek is going to blow up every single slate. He's so great. He's just a victim of Miami being too good. I think it's the primary thing for him. Or, playing AFC East teams that are going to muck it up. Like, those are really the two big dings for Tyreek. But, good game last week. It seemed like he was going to be chalked. Ended up quite as highly owned as it seemed. That said, for Tyreek, he's in play every week. The price tag is a little bit gross, but he can break the slate at that price tag still. He has got the best usage and opportunity in the league, and it's not even close, I think, to A.J. Brown. Number 2, A.J. Brown, though, 0.57 EPA per target, so technically a little bit better in terms of the efficiency than Tyreek is at 0.53. A.J. Brown, 10.3 intended touches per game, not getting any rushes, so that's all targets. 2.3 deep targets per game, but again, the difference between Tyreek and A.J. Brown's been a world beater, same amount of targets that are deep for both guys, but it's 0.7 EPA per target for A.J. Brown, and then 1.6 EPA per target for Tyreek Hill. So, Tyreek Hill twice as good, a little bit more than twice as good as A.J. Brown. And we know, you can use your eyes and see how great A.J. Brown is. It's impressive for Brown, but it's even more impressive to me for Tyreek. So that's the main thing. And then you add on the red zone usage, 1 red zone target per game for A.J. Brown compared to 1.6 for Tyreek, 0.4 inside the 10-yard line for A.J. Brown compared to 1.1 for Tyreek. That's why Tyreek is where he is. But A.J. Brown getting a number 2. Kudos to him. He has become, again, he's the number 1 receiver. Devontae is a clear number 2, and Dallas Goedert, I think, 2B. That's what the Philadelphia offense looks like now, which was not people's expectation coming in. I think it's entirely because A.J. Brown certainly has some political sway there in the org, getting Julio Jones signed, yelling for the ball, then getting the ball for the rest of the season, basically. He yelled once and then became a different player in his usage. That's great for A.J. Brown, but really, he's done everything he can with it too. So the only thing you can critique him for is not being Tyreek Hill. The man Brown is a straight dog. That is true. And shouts to Johnny, by the way. I've seen our guy Johnny on Twitter crushing it lately in the NBA streets. Maybe NFL too. So shout out Johnny. Always appreciate seeing the winners here. And hit some likes for this live stream. Yes, please do that. Thank you, Degenerate Card Collector. I appreciate that. Yes, please hit the like button here. I know kind of steamrolling through everything here as best we can to try to hit a nice timeline for the SPAGS rankings. But I always do appreciate the likes here, of course. Hitting the like button helps us get seen by more people. That's always the goal on Splash Play, even though I'm not pandering. I'm just doing the shit here. We know what the grind is here on Splash Play. Squirt Squad. I don't have a hand gesture. The Squirt Squad here. Squirt Squad always knows. Yeah, there's your squirt emoji. All right, let's other receivers to talk about. Jamar Chase. Main thing for Jamar Chase, so much more efficient than last year. Last year was a negative EPA per target guy. This year at 0.34 EPA per target. That is one that I really feel like he has made strides in who he is as a receiver, which you'd expect as a younger receiver as well. But last year Higgins was the efficient guy. Chase was just the volume guy. This year is Chase being the volume guy and the efficiency guy. That is a stride that you kind of have to note. For Jamar Chase, great usage as well. Best red zone usage, you can argue. Least of the guys that we're going to talk about here. 1.9 red zone targets per game. 0.7 inside the 10-yard line per game. That all looks great for Jamar Chase. A little bit less than the deep targets. One flat deep target per game. Maybe you can blame Joe Burrow for that one. Can blame the offense, whatever the case may be. Also, again, it's not that Tyreek A.J. Brown tier with the efficiency there. 0.35 EPA per target on deep throws. So, again, Tyreek 5 times better on deep throws, which is batshit. A.J. Brown twice as good as Jamar Chase on deep throws. That stuff matters when you're talking about just outlier fantasy performances. But Chase, great role, not injured. These are all things that look great for Chase. And he could end up, I guess, as wide receiver 1 if something bad happens for Tyreek Hill. He's hanging around just enough. But really notice the Chase here. I think it's a pretty clear-cut top 3, and after that, at least until Justin Jefferson gets back in, I think there's a pretty big jump here where that's the tier. Tyreek Hill, A.J. Brown, Jamar Chase, and honestly, you can make the case that Chase might just be on his own tier because of how good that Hill and Brown have been. But that's how I view it at the very least. Keenan Allen, again, getting a little bit less good with how this offense has been looking for the Chargers, but still 0.42 EPA per target, 11 targets per game. I think the issue with him is just that not having Mike Williams out there has made the defenses key on him a little bit more, and he just can't get quite as open as he used to. As you'd expect with an older guy, always been a great route runner. That's going to be good for him, but Still just not the same guy and not the explosive athlete that you need to be able to command targets like a Jamar Chase, like a Tyreek, like an A.J. Brown. That's the biggest critique I have for Keenan Allen. Besides that, though, if the Chargers offense runs hot, we know Allen can be that guy. I've personally just been burned a little bit too much by Keenan Allen on showdown slates, on main slates, that I'm kind of getting a little bit iffy on that. That might mean DFS-wise. Good time to buy in on Keenan Allen because he is number 4 overall for a reason here. Justin Jefferson at number 5, injured. We'll see what happens. I do expect with Josh Dobbs to come back in, we'll probably see a similar target workload for Justin Jefferson, but a little bit less success rate on them. I think for Jefferson, the situation probably changes the least out of everybody, where Dobbs is not going to throw those 50-yard darts to Jordan Addison. So that's going to greatly change Addison's game. Justin Jefferson, though, he's not the highest ADOT guy, 11.4 air yards per target. So I do expect him to be able to hold into the spot. And I think by the time all is said and done, he probably gets ahead of Keenan Allen. I think he can still get ahead of Chase. Probably not get ahead of A.J. Brown, but he's going to be right around where you needed him to be if you took him number 1 overall. So Jefferson, I think things looking good. And also good news about his recovery. Apparently well ahead of where they expect him to be. So the initial timeline was 4 to 6 weeks. Apparently it's going to be closer to 4 is what it sounds like so far. We'll see how that goes. But for Jefferson, things looking good for him right now. So he's back on the list, and we'll see what he can do moving forward. Puka Nacua. Puka keeps getting there. 0.38 EPA per target, 11.3 targets per game. The more that Kupp continues to suck, the more you're going to see Puka hover around. I think the best case scenario for the Rams is these guys basically be 1-to-1, getting about 9 to 10 targets per game each. If that's the case, you are seeing what I thought this would be earlier on, Puka being the Robert Woods to Cooper Kupp's Cooper Kupp. So that's what I think the situation ends up long term. That said, the health issues with Stafford, the Rams getting a little bit less effective by week. We'll see if that's a Kyren Williams thing or if that's just teams figuring out what the Rams are trying to do. That would not be great for Puka, but Puka just keeps hanging around. I keep expecting him to fall down. He keeps hanging around with where he's been in the SPAGS rankings. So kudos to Puka. Puka, I think, another guy, sealed the draft potential for sure for Puka. Adam Thielen, guy that I did not like coming in, but really in the week 2 for what he had, not going to have the outlier fantasy performance. It's going to put people on the box score, but still 0.51 EPA per target, 10.1 targets per game. The air yards are basically a Mon-Ross St. Brown tier, 7.2 air yards per target, but he's doing everything he can with them. So I can't really argue it too much. 1.3 red zone targets per game, 0.7 inside the 10-yard line per game. That all looks pretty good. So I think for Adam Thielen, he's in a nice spot overall. The situation didn't seem like it changed that much with the shift in play calling to Thomas Brown. That's also a good sign for Thielen backers. I would keep playing him in DFS. I think the fact that he wasn't that chalky with the price tag coming up means that he is an okay play to go back to. But we know what the floor is. He doesn't get into the box, he's going to kill you. If he does get into the box, he's going to help you out a lot. That's basically what Adam Thielen's going to be. OG1 Kenobi, I'll hit your question in a sec there. Stephon Diggs, less efficient than last year. I think the one thing I have some concern with is that Gabe Davis's new role might hurt Diggs a little bit, where if they keep Gabe getting these short targets, like that is where Diggs has feasted in the past. But I do think the offense being a little more explosive, a little more downfield, I think these are things that look pretty good for a guy like Stephon Diggs moving forward. Again, he's less efficient than last year. Last year was 0.35 EPA per target. This year he's at 0.21. I don't know that that's Diggs' fault. I feel like he's just not getting as good of a looks the last few weeks. We'll see. Diggs, we know the ceiling is there. We know he's also giving you a decent floor. So I still think he was worth with where he got drafted in the first round. That said, I would like to see a spike week coming up soon because I think that's what helps him get more solidly close to that A.J. Brown, Tyreek Hill tier. For right now, though, like Brown is definitely looking like he was a better pick. And I'm not sure that there's a sign of him, of like Diggs being able to pass Brown. I don't think that's the most likely. So Diggs a good play, but Brown the better play is how these guys are getting drafted. CeeDee Lamb right behind these guys. He's great. 0.63 EPA per target is the best mark of any guy getting meaningful volume. That said, he's only getting 8.6 targets per game. Every other guy on this list gets more than 10 targets per game. So that is the biggest issue. Is this Dallas offense? It's not that aggressive, which we knew coming into the year was going to be a big flaw with them. But also CeeDee Lamb not getting as many red zone targets, 1.1 red zone targets, 0.7 inside the 10-yard line per game. It's just not enough to get over the hump in a major way. So he's crazy efficient. He's really good. He's clearly the best receiver in that Dallas wide receiver core by a wide margin. Those are all good things. He can give you a spike. We get 5% ownership as he did this past week. That's also a great thing. But week to week, it's like he can give you 10 points and it wouldn't shock me just because of how Dallas plays. But if they're front running, apparently he is still firmly in the hunt. So something to keep in mind there. If you have a Dallas advantage game, maybe it's not as much for Tony Pollard thing. Maybe it is a CeeDee Lamb thing. And that's something where I think people will be more inclined to play the opposite way. Last guy on the list, Amon-Ra St. Brown, 11.3 intended touches per game. He's doing pretty well with them. A 0.16 EPA per target, could be more efficient, but it's hard to be more efficient because he's only getting 6.9 air yards per target. So again, the closer to the line of scrimmage you're getting that target, the less higher EPA is going to be for the most part, unless you're shedding a ton of tackles. And Amon-Ra can do that in space, but for the most part, he's not going to be the most elusive guy. 8.8% avoided tackle rate for Amon-Ra in the year, which compared to CeeDee Lamb's avoiding tackles at a 28% rate. Tyreek Hill, a 25% rate. Same thing for A.J. Brown. Jamar Chase, 27% avoided tackle rate. So Amon-Ra, not that elusive. Like, he can't create the value for himself. But PPR-wise, he's great. On a half-point PPR, a little bit less great. Same thing for him as well as CeeDee Lamb. 1 red zone target per game, 0.4 inside the 10-yard line. His red zone work is just not there enough because the Lions really want to run the ball in the red zone. That's not going to get better for him when David Montgomery comes back in. So Amon-Ra, I think he can move up a little bit. Like, if Puka and Adam Thielen fall off, Amon-Ra can move up. But I think with where he is right now, he feels like he's kind of locked in, at least in my rankings, to wide receiver 10. All right, OG1 Kenobi asking about Douglas. I don't think Douglas is going to rank very highly for me, but actually, before I hit on OG1 Kenobi's questions, the guys right behind the top 10, which I'll read off real fast. Mike Williams is out for the year, so he doesn't count. Devontae Adams, Brandon Ayuk, DJ Moore, Nico Collins hanging around, and Chris Godwin. His role's gone a little bit better. Obviously, had some success getting some touchdowns recently, so Chris Godwin hanging in there amongst the top 15 guys. And then not far behind, Hopkins, Wilson, Metcalf, so some guys could certainly make a move upwards, but definitely, the top 10 feels pretty secure. I think besides Puka and Adam Thielen is how I view it. All right, so Demario Douglas. And of course, I'm going to drop the full SPAGS rankings in the pinned comment down below. So if you have any guys you want to look up, you'll be able to do that the second this video ends. Douglas, the guys that Douglas is ranked around don't give me a lot of hope. I have him ranked around Justin Watson, Nick Westbrook-Akine, Michael Gallup. I do have him ahead of Jackson Smith and Jigba, so I guess that's a positive for him. Douglas, 0.15 EPA per target, only 22.7 snaps per game. So you need the snaps to go up in a big way, and I don't know that it will. Like, Bourne is clearly the focal point of that offense. I don't think Douglas is that guy. Olave should make a leap upwards. Right now, I would have him behind Pickens, ahead of Jacoby Myers. Olave, 9.6 targets per game. He needs to convert on the deep targets, though. He's getting 2.4 deep targets per game. Only one of them is catchable. He's catching half the catchable balls. So, like, he's getting the opportunities, but they're not great opportunities, and he's not catching them when they are good opportunities. He's got a negative 0.65 EPA per target on deep balls. That is just not where you need Chris Olave to be. Like, his underlying usage, like the underneath usage, is okay. But if he's not converting deep balls, he's just not the same player. Like, how he gets there is going to be like 50-yard touchdowns and shit. At least having one of those a game or having a shot to get there per game. He's just not doing it. So is it on Carr? I think a good amount there. If the catchable ball rate is half of the targets you're getting or less than half, that's on Derek Carr. But Olave is also only catching half the ones that are catchable. So it's kind of on the both of them and how I view that. MT's finally healthy. Please start playing like young MT. Yeah, Michael Thomas has been doing his thing relative to what that means. I feel like Michael Thomas is okay. I would have him graded a little bit lower than Michael Pittman, a little bit higher than Marquise Brown. But yeah, this New Orleans offense feels like it should have an outlier day at some point. But now we're halfway through the year and we haven't seen the New Orleans double stack get there. So, like, I don't know. Kamara just takes so much away. Taysom Hill continues to take so much away. It's hard for them all to get there if you have that many guys, like, taking just enough away as, like, the baseline of what's happening every game. But at a certain point, like, I do expect the Saints to have, like, that double stack with Carr get there. It's just we're not there yet. All right, guys, there you go. There's your SPAGS rankings for the week. Of course, there's no video out there that labors over this stuff as much as I do, but I try to do my best to give you guys the picture as I see it. And of course, the SPAGS rankings, which will be down in the pinned comments down below, are really the best reflection of how I could do that. So check that out when the video is done. Of course, follow me at Chris Spags. Follow the show at SplashPlayPod. And of course, don't be shy here about hitting the subscribe button, hitting the like button, leaving a comment here. We do these videos every Wednesday, and I think they're a good foundation to build off of, both for the rest of the season as well as for just what you're going to do in a single week. So please go join the journey here on Splash Play, Monday to Friday at 11 a.m. That's all I will ever do here is grind for you guys in the name of fantasy football. But I appreciate all you hanging out with me today. Again, hit that like button before you go. I will see you guys tomorrow for the Showdown video. So enjoy your day. See you soon. And of course, good luck. Bye.